All right, welcome everybody to the first episode of season 2 of the AI Rebels podcast. We are here today with Avthar from Timescale. Avthar, could you just kind of introduce yourself real quick and give a quick breakdown of what Timescale is?
Fantastic. Thanks, Jacob and Spencer, for having me. Really excited to be here. Yeah, my name is Avthar. I'm the product leader for AI at Timescale. Timescale is a Postgres database cloud company. So we host and manage Postgres databases for customers building a variety of applications from IoT and finance to most recently RAG and AI agents, AI applications.
Nice. Nice. And so how long have you been working with AI tools?
Yeah, I would say, since ChatGPT came out in late 2022, I've since fallen down
Mhm.
the AI rabbit hole. I did study, you can call it like, I don't know if you can call it classical machine learning back in university, where you looked at, neural nets and all that stuff. So I do have some of that foundations
Mhm.
from my computer science degree, but I've been really deep in this world of AI tools and not just using these tools as an end user, but also seeing like what goes into building them and how we can help software developers build more useful tools. And that's kind of what we do at Timescale, building tools for developers who are making AI applications.
There's a lot of work to be done there. I think that
Yeah.
a lot of people out there are underestimating how much work there is still to be done, and it's really exciting. I'd be curious to hear, Avtar, what was kind of like I guess how I'd ask is like, what's the moment that kind of convinced you that AI is something worth spending time on, is worth building tools for?
Yeah, I think for me, I can take you back to a time where I was in university and I was kind of selecting the research topics that I wanted to go deeper on. And I remember thinking back then, this was, I think, 2016 at the time.
Hmm.
Um, it seemed like AI, if you wanted to do work around machine learning and AI, you had to go to like a FANG company because AI at that time was all about big data. It was all about,
Right,
hey, you
right.
need to go to these companies with these large data sets. And I
hmm
think with the rise of ChatGPT and especially open source models and the fact that an individual engineer or individual person who's interested in building an application can now um, integrate AI into their business, into their applications without having a large team, with using just off-the-shelf models, whether that be OpenAI's GPT-4o or something open source. I think for me that made me say, hey, this is something to pay attention to, because this decreases the amount of people that you need to build something useful. And I think whenever something like that happens, I'm like, okay, I've got to pay attention. And I kind of dropped everything that I was doing and spent nights and weekends upskilling on AI myself, trying out all the different products, building like demo applications myself, trying to evangelize for it like within my own company, Timescale. And so for me, that recognition that, hey, this really increases the potential impact that a single interested, curious, skilled individual can have was the aha moment for me.
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
it.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Go ahead, Jake.
I was just gonna say, I feel like the human race's potential just like exponentially increased with the advent of more and more AI tools. Like you said, one person, if our capacity is measured, in levels, we had a level 3 capacity before, and now it's like exponentially past that. Um, it's very, very exciting.
100%. I mean, all technology is fundamentally leveraged. And I think with AI, the leverage of a single individual, and specifically in my world of work, a single software engineer has gone up, as you said, tenfold, thanks to all these different tools. And then also those end user capabilities, like the amount of value that you can bring in an application, has gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Avthar, could you tell us a little bit about one? I know two tools you're working on, Pgai and Pgvectorscale. Can you, maybe before we get into like the nitty gritty, kind of help paint the picture of like
Yeah.
what hole these are filling? Like what's going on here? Why did you build these?
With pleasure. Happy to give you an overview of that. The best way to think about the work that we're doing at Timescale around PGAI and Pgvectorscale is this question of what do you need to build an AI application? And we play in this space called the vector database space. You guys have probably have heard of vector databases. They've exploded in interest since ChatGPT. And fundamentally, what vector databases allow you to do is leverage the capabilities of LLMs on your own data. So you see, when ChatGPT came out, a lot of people had this epiphany that, hey, I love ChatGPT, but it obviously has limitations. It has a knowledge cutoff. It doesn't know my own company's data. I can't dump all the files into it because I have private data that I don't want it to have on the public ChatGPT. All these other kinds of limitations. And fundamentally, what a vector database is allows you to to find and then connect relevant data and pass it to LLMs to then do processing and reasoning on. So vector databases exploded in interest, and every developer was trying to figure out hey, how can I use a vector database? What can I build with it? And that's where our work at Timescale comes in, because often when developers are building applications, they face this question of, okay, do I use a new specialized tool for something, or can I use a general purpose technology that I might already know and that my company might already deploy? And that's where Postgres as a database comes in. Timescale, as I mentioned, we're a Postgres database company. Postgres is a very well known and loved database. It's been around for more than 30 years. According to last year's Stack Overflow developer survey, it's the most popular database in the world. And so a lot of people already know and love this tool, and it's got a whole bunch of robust tooling and a thriving documentation and developer ecosystem. And so the question is, when you're building an AI application, do you adopt a specialized vector database where you have to kind of learn it? It's obviously new. It's a new system to integrate into your data stack. Or can you just use a general purpose database that you already might have? And where our work at Timescale comes in is we essentially extend Postgres, the general purpose database, and give it capabilities that one would generally associate it with specialized vector databases like large scale data storage and such, as well as the ability to access AI models like embedding and generation models within the database with these two new extensions. So that's the overview. We're basically allowing developers to do more with the technologies that they already know. And the reason why that's important is because AI is so interesting because it's the speed of innovation. Everything is happening on a scale of weeks and months rather than years and decades in terms of the improvements. And innovation speed is bottlenecked by the time that it takes to get up to speed with new products. And if we can allow people to do more with the tools that they already know, that unblocks the rate of innovation, and we hope that it allows people to actually build more useful, more interesting applications faster, and as end users ourselves, get more useful, more interesting applications to use sooner rather than later.
So I have a quick follow-on question from that. So why are vector databases so much more preferable for building retrieval augmented generation apps than just a raw Postgres database? I think that this would be an interesting topic for viewers.
For sure. Yeah, so you mentioned the keywords there, retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, as it's sometimes abbreviated. And fundamentally, a vector database allows you to do search. And specifically, the kind of search that you're doing is what's called similarity search or vector search rather than keyword search. So keyword search is kind of like Google. You have a set of keywords. Maybe you're searching about fruits. So you might have apple, pear, banana. And if the text contains those exact matches of words, then you'll return those results. A vector database, the way to think about it is that it allows you to search on on concepts and ideas rather than exact textual matches. And Postgres didn't have this capability initially. And extensions like Pgvector, which is a popular open source extension, and then our extensions that we built, Pgvectorscale and Pgai, basically add these capabilities to Postgres. And the idea there is that, a specialized vector database, the reason why it's useful in retrieval augmentation is that it allows you to find via search the most relevant data to a particular query. So let's say the user asks, "Hey, tell me about my let me not do an analytics example, but let's say a user asks, "Hey, tell me about the weather patterns in South Africa," which is where I'm from. So I'm just going to use South Africa. So in that case, you're not just going to find things that have the exact matches to weather and South Africa, but you're going to get things that don't have that exact textual match, but have idea matches, like, for example, rainfall, humidity, droughts, etc., etc. And what we notice is that databases like Postgres have advantages over specialized vector databases because you have the search component, but you also have the ability to query like structured data in SQL. And when you think about retrieval augmented generation, retrieval could be anything. In this case, retrieval is most often search results. So you do a search over your data and you get the most relevant results, and then that allows LLMs to produce better end outputs. But in this case, you might also want to ask like analytical questions, for example, like, "Hey, what is the average rainfall of this area in South Africa?" to continue with the example. And let's say you have that data in the database. So in this case, you could actually build an agent that can query the database and then give that to the LLM to then reason and give an output to the user. So at a high level, what these extensions do is allow Postgres to perform similarity search. That's kind of the key innovation of vector databases. I must also add that the devil is in the details around scale and performance. So obviously, like if you just have a small number of documents that you're searching over, a small number of things that you want to augment the LLM with, you can use kind of anything. You can even use like a NumPy array or something like that. But once you start dealing with millions and millions of text snippets or millions and millions of documents, then you have the engineering realities of performance, latency, cost coming into play. And that's really where the things that we've built shine, where it's like, hey, for developers who are building production applications rather than just trying to play around, Pgvectorscale and Pgvector is a good choice for you. So I will also say that.
Awesome. Yeah, what you guys are working on is sorry, Jake, did you have a question?
No, go for it.
I don't want to. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm not dominating the questions because I'm fascinated here. And I apologize if maybe some of this is covered in the links that you sent beforehand. I only had time to read a few of them. So I'd be curious to hear. So I guess first, when did these new packages for you guys? When did they go live? And then second, have you seen some interesting user cases with it yet, or is it still too new?
Cool. Yeah. So these two new extensions that we built actually were released on the 11th of June. So this is last week as of the time that we're recording.
Awesome.
But in terms of the use cases, Timescale has been, let me frame kind of how these extensions play, and then I'll give you some use cases afterwards. So these use cases, these extensions rather, they enable developers to build AI applications on Postgres, either in a more scalable way, which is where the Pgvectorscale extension comes in, or in a more easy to get started way, which is where the PGAI extension comes in. They both work with this other extension called Pgvector, and Timescale has been offering Pgvector on our product for more than a year now. And we actually have had a lot of customers building AI applications with Postgres. There's one or two companies that I'll quickly run through. They both have really, really cool use cases. So one is called Market Reader. And basically what they allow users to do is that they're a financial information platform. So as markets change, whether it's stock prices going up and down during the day, they basically give an explanation to users as to why those changes are occurring. And they do this by searching for the most relevant news stories about a certain stock. And then they perform RAG by summarizing and synthesizing those stories in order to inform the user, hey, Nvidia stock is up, this is why. Maybe they had an earnings announcement and this is what they said. Or maybe they have a new partnership, or maybe a competitor released earnings and it was bad, and so now their stock is up, etc. So that's one use case that is powered by Postgres and Timescale, and that has production customers today. Another use case that I'll talk about again, under the theme of building AI applications with Postgres, is a company called Open Sourced. So they're a very interesting company all about an analytics platform for open source projects. So you can analyze Kubernetes, React, any open source project. LangChain is also another popular one. And what they allow users to do is that they've built an agent that allows you to get insights into the behind the scenes of open source projects, whether it's like who's committing, what is kind of the rate of commits, information about people who know certain languages in that project, etc. And that is all powered with Timescale and Postgres as well. And that example, for example, for the company open source, they store more than 100 million GitHub events. So anytime a commit happens, anytime a PR is made on a repo, anytime a issue is filed, they're taking that data, they're processing it, they're storing it in Postgres, and then they allow their users to use that as a basis to answer questions over. And so you can imagine the scale this is happening at. And that kind of scale is kind of why we built Pgvectorscale in particular, is because, sooner or later, you're going to run into various bottlenecks. One of the main bottlenecks that developers often run into is the fact that with a lot of so vector search, in order to do vector search properly, you need what's called an index, and those indexes require memory, or otherwise known as RAM. And one of the bottlenecks that you run into is that if your data set continues to grow and grow, you eventually have to upgrade your RAM more and more, especially if you're using a managed cloud provider. And RAM is really expensive. So as you continue to upgrade your setup, your costs are going to increase. And one of the innovations in Pgvectorscale is this extension, is this index type called streaming disk ANN, which actually allows you to keep the index on disk, which is a lot cheaper than RAM, and it leverages SSDs, allowing you to get great search performance without the corresponding increase in costs. And so that's kind of one of the things and a reason why we built this extension, allowing developers to kind of scale without worrying about these costs increasing as well.
So is the idea there that you store it on an SSD because that's essentially, the same access time as reading from RAM? That's super interesting.
Yes. Yeah, at a high level, that's exactly the idea. It's to say, hey, if you can't fit the whole index in memory, SSDs are really fast. And so if you can leverage that, you can still get great retrieval performance without having to pay for RAM. You then just, you can buy instances with SSDs and, use that, and it's less expensive than buying the corresponding amount of memory or the next level of memory that you'll need. We actually have a blog post that goes into detail about how this index works. I'll send it to you guys. You can put a link in the show notes, and it goes into the nitty gritty about how this index works and how it actually stores data across memory and disk.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Awesome. That was going to be my next question. I was going to say we probably shouldn't get too deep into the nitty gritty on this one, but I would love to read about it. Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, it's actually. I was going to say it's actually based off. So this the index that we built is called Streaming Disk ANN. It's based off some state of the art research done at Microsoft. The paper that they wrote was called the Disk ANN paper, and they developed it to power billion vector scale search within Microsoft. And what we did at Timescale is, because that research is open source, we then took that and we basically got inspired by it and built the first implementation for Postgres. And that's kind of, that was the basis. It's both things that we've added in terms of unique insights and innovations, but also building on the existing research in the community about like what are the best practices for vector search.
That's fascinating. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very.
You guys are doing some cool work over there.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to ask is like, okay, you've launched now about a week ago these two tools. What's next for this? Are you going to be spending your time with these, or going to be developing new tools? What's the plan?
Yeah, so I can give you some, I guess you could call this breaking news, but for the other extension that we released called PGAI, initially that extension is all about bringing AI models closer to your data and allowing developers to access them in Postgres. Initially, we only had the capabilities of creating embeddings and accessing models that were OpenAI models, so OpenAI's embeddings and GPT-4o. Today, we actually release support for open source models via Ollama, which is a very popular way of accessing open source models and hosting them locally. So that's breaking news that's now live for users to use, and that's super exciting because it means that now you can use an open source vector database like Postgres and Pgai and Pgvectorscale, plus open source models, and you can run everything locally, which is really cool. So that's one thing, and I think that is a instance of a theme of enabling more different kinds of embedding models and generation models in PGAI. And then on the Pgvectorscale front, there's a lot of potential optimizations that we can do around improving the developer experience. So, for example, the initial release focused a lot on fast search and high accuracy. And there's some work that we can do around enabling faster index build times. And we're also doing some work on the Timescale cloud product side about just enabling developers to get started and build RAG applications easier with Postgres. And so some of the themes that we're thinking about are things like, creating embeddings for your data more easily, updating embeddings that are already in the database more easily as well when the underlying data changes, et cetera, et cetera. There's also some work that we're doing around text to SQL, which, being a Postgres company, having that ability to have structured data stored in your database, how can you enable LLMs to access that and also potentially power agents that can make queries on your database and provide your users with relevant data. So those three areas are at a high level what we have coming up on the roadmap. And it's really excited for what we're going to release over the coming months.
Yeah, that's huge things.
I'd be curious to hear a little bit in what ways in developing PGAI, in what ways did you guys approach it differently from other retrieval augmented generation frameworks, and in what ways did you kind of lean on lessons learned elsewhere from other people?
Yeah, so for PGAI, and this is kind of a theme in building these two extensions, and also a theme as Timescale as a company. As I mentioned in the beginning, Timescale is a Postgres database company, and we have this principle of let's build on the best of existing work that has gone out there, and let's only innovate in the areas that actually matters to our users, and we can leverage the best practices for everything else. So where we've done this as a company in the past is the first product that Timescale ever made was something called Timescale DB, which is where the name comes from. It was a way to turn Postgres, the general purpose relational database, into a time series database for storing large amounts of time series and analytics data. And the way that worked is it had an extension that handled all the time series capabilities, but all the other things were handled by Postgres, and that's kind of the beauty of the Postgres extension framework. We did the same thing with PGAI. We did a similar thing with PGAI, whereby when you create embeddings, for example, we use Pgvector, which is the popular open source extension for vector handling in Postgres, and we use their data type rather than trying to reinvent that ourselves, so that you can have the stack of extensions that allow you to turn your database into an AI database, essentially, without us having to rebuild all those capabilities. And so, like, building off the work of other people. I also think that one of the other things that we saw with building PGI and Pgvectorscale is just leaning on the Postgres ecosystem. And, like, for example, some of the things that we've developed is like when you're using Pgvectorscale and PGI, you can use any Postgres driver or tool. It works with all of them. You don't have to kind of us as a team having to create our own tools. I also think that with PGAI, we looked at, in terms of stuff that we did differently, we looked at how some of the other, both vector databases, but also just how developers were like kind of duct taping different things together. And we listened to some of the current customers that we had around like what are the problems that you currently face. And one of the big ones was, let's say you have a set of a data set in tables in your database, and you want to create embeddings from that data that's already in Postgres. You would have to then find a way to load it out, create the embeddings, and then load that data back in. And so we're like, hey, if your data is already in the database, why don't we just give you capabilities to do that? Another way is where you have data that's already being embedded, and a new embedding model comes out, or you want to test a new embedding model. Again, we talked about the pace of innovation is really quick in the AI space, and so new models are coming out all the time. How can you do that without taking out all your data, creating the embeddings, creating a new table, etc.? Now you can just do this in your database in SQL. And so those are the kinds of considerations that we made with PGI in particular. And to summarize, building upon the best of open source work, like leveraging Pgvector data types. And I'll also say for Pgvectorscale, we made the conscious decision to have Pgvector as a dependency, whereby you would leverage, again, the Pgvector data type, the Pgvector distance functions. This is getting into the nitty gritty of how search is done, but choosing not to reinvent that, and instead having the key capabilities of Pgvectorscale live as an additional index on your data. To give you an example of why that's important for users, it means that if you already have vector data in Postgres, you can just install Pgvectorscale and use it and create a new index on top of your existing data. You don't have to migrate data. You don't have to drop tables. You don't have to change the data type. These are some of the considerations that we took into account in thinking about like, hey, what would just the best user experience look like? And, that involves building on the work of others, but also choosing like where to innovate and where to differentiate.
I don't know why mine popped up with thumbs down, because I was very excited. Because I think work like this is so underrated in so many ways, because these are the types of problems that are critical to solve for this technology to reach saturation among companies. Like there are so many companies with massive Postgres databases that probably want to leverage AI in some way, and little things like this just they make it so much easier.
It really bridges that gap from. I think I saw an article you sent, Avthar, about turning
Postgres developers into
Postgres
AI engineers.
To AI engineers.
Yeah.
And I feel like it also takes a Postgres company and can turn it into an AI powered company, right? Like so quick. That's incredibly exciting. So
exactly right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask. I'm curious, Avthar, with these tools and with other tools Timescale's doing, how I've been thinking about open source as an idea, right? And how critical it's been for AI. Do you think it's sustainable in the long run? Like, do you think things will remain open source, or do you think companies are going to start taking something, now it's theirs, Apple comes in, buys whatever, OpenAI buys this piece, or do you think the open source model is sustainable?
Yeah, and this is something, again, Timescale, having started with AI not being the primary product, we do have some experience in navigating how do you actually build a sustainable open source business. And the answer that we've come up with is, you want to open source things that are going to be valuable for developers and are going to actually increase that rate of innovation. And for us, for example, making Pgvectorscale and PGAI open source and free for any developer to use, our so-called competitors can actually host it on their cloud platforms and offer it and make money, and we're not going to see a cent of that. But the way that why that's valuable is because it's a rising tide that lifts all the boats in the industry. More applications are getting built, more useful things are actually happening for end users, and that is actually more value being created. And the way that we make money as a company, as Timescale, is we provide a really great cloud experience that emphasizes ease of use, worry-free, and a great developer experience. And for developers who don't necessarily want to host and manage things themselves, or developers see that, hey, like these are the guys that have built this. Let me go to their product, and because you're going to get that first class support and things like that. That is kind of how we see ourselves being sustainable. I also think that in general, there's this tension between open source, and it has to be like open source and like proprietary solutions. I think that like because of what's at stake here, I think that and when I say what's at stake, what I mean is like AI is fundamentally like changing every industry in the world. Every single product is being reimagined around AI. AI features are being added to every product. I mean, look no further than Apple with their WWDC a couple of weeks ago or last week. The surface area of where LLMs and AI is useful is huge, and we haven't really begun to even tap that. And the question is for developers, like the reason why open source is important is because it allows you to build with confidence in knowing that, hey, this decision that I'm making, even if something happens to the company that's developing it, I can host the software myself, I can fork it, I can modify it how I want to, and it gives you that confidence that it actually allows you to move faster. Whereas, and I think we saw this with the OpenAI board drama that happened last year, where Sam Altman was removed and then reinstated within a matter of days, that made the switch flip in a lot of people's heads, where they're like, oh, if I'm just betting on one company and one set of proprietary models, it's really risky, because even though you think that like everything is going to be okay, weekends like that showed us that like anything can happen. And so that's kind of caused an explosion in interest in both open source models, but also from our perspective, open source matters from a vector database perspective, because that's a core technology that powers all these applications. And so I think, to summarize what I've said, I think open source is extremely important for innovation. It kind of allows the pace of innovation to increase, both on a model level, allowing people to use things more cheaply, but also from a vector database level as well. And then in terms of the open versus closed source, I think in the long run, in terms of models, obviously closed source models have better capabilities. But what we saw from, for example, the Apple WWDC is that you can go a long way with open source models or on-device models, and they can actually solve a lot of problems that actually have day-to-day value for people. So it's I don't want to make a proclamation that like open source is going to win at the end in terms of the models, because like we don't know that. But I think open source has a huge role to play in enabling more AI applications to be built, and like better products for people to use at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because I think that and I want to caveat what I say, because I don't want people to take me as an expert. I'm somebody who pays a lot of attention to the space, and I play with the tools every day. I build apps with them. But the kind of the next big advancement to me, I think, will be drastically increasing the efficiency of inference and training for models. And when that happens, I think that the open source locally hosted model of language models is going to be absolutely dominant. Obviously, there's still going to be a place for massive models like GPT-4, right, that are hosted on a cloud somewhere. But yeah, as you noted, Avthar, like with the Apple's WWDC, I think that really was like a taste of what's coming down the line in the next couple of years. Samsung is going to launch their own local models. Sony is going to have their own local models. Xbox is going to have their own local models. Like there's going to be thousands of these really specialized language models that are dedicated towards, generating really specific grammars. Like, I don't know, like an Elder Scrolls NPC language model running on your Xbox, just to use a silly example. Stuff like that. It's going to be fascinating to watch where it goes. And I think that there's there's so much value left there. I understand to some degree the people who have concerns about language models kind of plateauing. At least it seems like they may have plateaued somewhat around GPT-4 level. But I don't share those concerns at all, because I think that there's still juice left in the multimodal training model. I think that GPT-4o shows us that. And then second, because there's still so much juice left to squeeze in the current generation of models.
Yeah, in particular, I think one thing that I'll build on what you said is like there's this debate about, have we reached the plateau in terms of frontier model capabilities and foundation model capabilities? And, I'll shout out to one of my favorite tech podcasts out there, Stratechery, Ben Thompson. He recently had Daniel Gross and Nat Friedman on to talk about AI, and this was a topic that came up. And one thing that was very striking to me is that even if we have, like, let's assume we have reached that plateau, and we're not going to innovate, we're not going to improve as fast as we have been. The sheer amount of surface area that's out there for applying the state of the art models that we have today is gonna transform every product in the world, every company in the world. So I agree with you, Spencer, when you say that I actually think model capabilities are going to increase. That's what OpenAI and Anthropic and these companies are. That's their job, is to push that boundary. And then I think where companies like myself and my team at Timescale come in is to say, hey, let's look at the spectrum of capabilities out there and help developers build useful products for their users and help companies build better products. That's kind of where we're operating. And so, I think either way, the future is bright in terms of, technology and like what products people are going to be able to use.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other day I was well, it was actually with the Apple, all the announcements that they were doing with their capabilities, and I was sitting there and I like caught myself being like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That like yeah, that's a cool development. Like nice. Oh yeah, that's cool. And also I like caught myself and I was like, it's crazy that we're at this rate of innovation that these huge developments are just like, yeah, yeah, that's the logical next step. Like, why would we not do that? Of course. And it's like,
Of course,
no,
I can.
this is earth shattering, and this is akin to the invention of the internet. This changes the landscape of business, politics, government, everything. And I have to kind of remind myself sometimes to like appreciate what's going on here, that there's so much to do and there's so much unexplored territory in what's already there, let alone what's to come,
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
So I guess AI in general, Avthar, what do you use it for day to day, just like in your life?
Yeah, I use it a lot as I think for me, being a user of AI products is actually what gives me insights into what we have to build at Timescale in order to enable developers. Because then when you understand the end capabilities, that then allows you to build data infrastructure, which is kind of our main product at Timescale, to power that. So with that said, I use Perplexity a lot. Perplexity is kind of the default. I have an iPhone 15 Pro, and there's like an action button on the side. It's my default on the action button, and I use it to summarize and give me the TLDR on like product purchases that I'm thinking about. I think that Perplexity is what a wonderful product in terms of, again, productizing LLMs and applying them to search. That's fantastic. I use Cursor, the AI enabled what is the word called, IDE development tool. Cursor is amazing. My day job is as a product leader, so most of the time it's not writing code, but in the times that I am, it's super helpful. And I think just thinking about, I was a startup founder myself. I built a product that was used by a few thousand people, and just thinking about like the process that I went through to learn new technologies, and how much more efficient and easier they are going to be now that we have tools like ChatGPT, we have Cursor, we have GitHub Copilot. The stuff that I could build in a week today would probably take me at least a month or more previously, because I can have that just-in-time feedback and like get improvements made on the stuff that I am producing. with these AI tools much faster. Another tool that I like to use is called Circleback. They're a great AI meeting note-taking tool.
Mm.
And for me, as a PM, I'm in a lot of meetings, I'm in a lot of stakeholder calls, and I'm the kind of person who loves to take notes. And sometimes it can be distracting because my mechanical keyboard is clacking in the mic, etc.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Circleback is being great because I think that they pay attention into summarizing the conversations. And this is where I also think that it's an insight into, you have incumbents and then you have new companies that are coming up. And I think the execution and the attention to details that companies like Apple Pay is amazing, but also as for developers that are building new products out there, that attention to detail in terms of saying, hey, how can we craft our product experience for a particular kind of user, really allows you to win in the market and to displace companies like, for example, I've tried Zoom, I've tried some other ones out there, Outreach, etc. And Circleback's AI note taker is just the best. It has the best action items. It summarizes the conversation the best. It fits into my workflows. So those are 3 tools that I'd mention. And I think as a, we tinker around with various sample apps at Timescale. We're, building a assistant for our documentation so you can ask questions about it. We're thinking about some other internal applications as well. So that's just a taste of kind of how I use AI today. I'm very excited to get my hands on those things like these pendants where you can kind of record not just because I think, for example, Circleback is great for my digital footprint, my meetings every day, but to have something where I'm like, hey, this is what I said to my wife, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true. Let me go and do the thing that I said that I should do. That's a game changer.
Yeah. Also
We've all
asking,
been there.
because she's like, no, you said this, and you're like, no, I didn't. Oh.
And then the AI is like, yes, you did. Exactly.
Like, get on
and
it.
I think that's also, shows you for the spectrum of applications, you need to have different options around, on-device, privacy first, local LLMs would be most welcome in that case where it's like, hey, if I have something that's recording my day-to-day conversations, I don't really want that sitting up in the cloud. Like I'm happy to have that on my iPhone, but not on, not in someone's cloud storage somewhere. But for other things, like for example, hey, I really need a powerful model to build an agent around, and that kind of model, I'm happy to not have run locally right now because it's not possible.
So I'd be curious on follow-up question to that. What have been some pain points that you've personally had with AI or AI tools?
I think the biggest one that everyone has felt this is around accuracy and hallucinations. And I think this is where having more personalized AI, using RAG, the tools that we're building in PGAI around bringing models to the database so that you can then do processing on your data and creating embeddings so that, they do play a role there. I think that has been the biggest thing where it's part of the value proposition of LLMs is that they're supposed to save people time. Things that might have taken you an hour to do, you can now do in half an hour or 15 minutes. But I think when it's frustrating, and this has happened in the past, is where, let's say, previous versions of ChatGPT, I've asked it to do something, and then it's generated output, and I'm reading, and I'm like, this doesn't sound right. This is actively harmed my pursuit of this task rather than helping me, because now I have to, double check this, and now I have to, actually put more effort in myself. And I think that for me, what I've realized is these workflows about hey, the dream is you have an AI model and you go and say, hey, do this, and it does it perfectly. But now what I think about is, hey, how can I leverage my own creativity, my own insight, my own data that I have that I know that's relevant, and then use AI to kind of fill in my blind spots in terms of, let's say I'm writing a product release, so I'm writing a announcement tweet for a new feature in one of our products at Timescale. Instead of just saying, hey, write a tweet about this, I'm much more intentional in the way that I prompt the models. And I actually think that's made me like a better thinker around like, hey, what exactly am I looking for versus like, hey, do this thing and I'm going to, carry on after that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
And
that's
I want
interesting.
to kind of highlight something you just said about making it making you a better thinker. Because I see a lot of concern from people that relying on AI will make us dumber in some way. And to some degree, I don't think that's an entirely, what's the word? False fear. But I think that the thing that you just highlighted out there is really important, which is that if you are very intentional about how you're doing it and you think through, how you're prompting the machine, really what you're doing is you're applying your intellectual tools in a new way. You're just growing your brain. And it's a new type of skill. For me, I found that it's pretty similar actually to doing customer support over chat. You have to be very intentional about what you ask. You have to be very intentional about how you ask it as well, which is something that a lot of people don't appreciate. That, a simple what instead of a why can completely change the answer you get and how successful you are in accomplishing your goal.
Yeah, for sure. Avthar, with that, do you have any secret tips, advice on writing good prompts, on dealing with LLMs like that for end users?
I think my main advice would be to just try to use these tools a lot. There's a few, I follow a bunch of folks on Twitter that share prompts for various things. But I think the main thing is to try to use these tools a lot and also try to view them, especially when you're dealing with something like ChatGPT. Like I think when you're dealing with like tools with LLMs more integrated, it's a bit different. But let's just use ChatGPT as an example. Everyone probably uses it. You become very aware about like being specific about what you're looking for. I think about it as like, let's say you have this like really smart like university student who's like an intern at your company, and this person doesn't know what's on your mind, but they're very capable, they're very energetic, they can do it. You just need to be specific enough about like what you're looking for. And I think about like I've managed people, I've managed interns, managed teams, and you think about like, hey, what is the level of specificity I need to give? And then you can leverage things like, for example, now ChatGPT has memory. It remembers things about you. You can set, context that is carried between conversations, etc. And I think I think the dream maybe one day is that like the first time you use a tool, it's going to work amazingly and it's going to solve all your problems. But I think for now, the more that you're able to like work with these AI tools and understand like how they can fit into your workflows, the better. So that would be my advice. Unfortunately, no kind of secret sauce there, but I think it's just like being willing to view these things as tools, and they're very useful, and understanding like where they can play a role rather than as magic solutions that are gonna like solve every problem that you have.
Yeah, and I think that's a common thread we've heard from almost every single one of our guests is like just use it, like just get familiar with it, incorporate it into your day to day. So right on point. Spencer, did you have any additional questions, or Avthar, was there anything that you were hoping to cover that we haven't touched on yet?
No, I think I'll throw back to something that I said earlier. For me, the work that we're doing at Timescale and just bringing it back to the new products that we released, it's all about enabling people to build applications quicker, more easily with the tools that they know. And I think the two decisions that we made, one to build on top of an existing database ecosystem in Postgres, as well as to make things open source, for me that is hopefully going to lead to more applications being built, more developers becoming, as you said, taking application developers and turning them and giving them AI engineering skills. For me, that's very exciting because I think that the more that we can have useful, thoughtful applications of AI into products, the more it's going to help our lives. And so I'm just excited and grateful to play my small part in that at Timescale. and eager to see in your audience people who are developers and who are going to try this out. Hopefully, it'll help them as well.
I'll probably go try it out. But probably I definitely will.
Happy to hear that. Yeah, and the cool thing is that all of these are open source, and so if you have suggestions, if you have fixes yourself, like we're more than happy to have those committed and integrated into the project.
That's awesome. Great.
Well, thank you so much, Avthar.
If people want to follow you,
that's exactly what I was going to ask.
If people want to follow you, Avthar, follow the work you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
For sure. So I'm pretty active on Twitter. Or X. My handle is at Avthar S, Avthars. On LinkedIn, it's just my name, Avthar Sewrathan. You can follow me, also sharing similar insights around AI there. If you're interested in keeping up with stuff that I write, avthar.com is the website, and have a little blog there as well. And then for Timescale, if you're interested in keeping up with Timescale as a company, our products in AI, as well as general Postgres database knowledge, we're at timescale.com and on all the platforms at timescaledb.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Really, really had fun, and really appreciate the range of questions. And hopefully, this has been exciting for users. Keen to see where this goes next.
Yeah, we're excited too. Thanks, Avthar.